I had an idea for a video. How expensive would it be to play every Sonic game? Then I realized, man, that's a stupid idea. Do you know how many Sonic games there are? The answer is no. You probably don't, and neither do I. So instead I figured, okay, how about I narrow the scope a bit and just make a video where I find out how expensive it would be to play every mainline Sonic game. But what is and isn't a mainline game is a whole other issue. In fact, it's so complicated that I made a 3-part video series about the topic. You can go check it out if you literally have nothing better to do. So, to keep things simple and fair, I'm going to go by the canon games listed on the official Sonic timeline on the Japanese Sonic website called the Sonic Channel. The timeline is not perfect. In fact, Chris Hernandez, the lore manager at Sega, and yes, that is his official title on his LinkedIn, even said to look out for updates. But barring a few weird entries, I think it's honestly a fairly decent list of the core Sonic games. So with all of that out of the way, let's find out how expensive it is to play every Sonic game on the official timeline. Also, full transparency, I was inspired to make this video by King Deluxe video called How Expensive Is It to Watch the Entire Pokemon Anime, so go check that out if you're interested. To set up some ground rules, we're going to assume that you already have a PC setup capable of playing these games with a computer, a monitor, a keyboard, etc. If we really wanted to factor in everything you need to buy to play these games, we'd have to consider paying your electric bill to power your PC, an internet subscription to download the games, a proper diet of food to keep you physically alive while you play the games. But I'm going to assume you have those things covered, and plus, I ain't got time for that. But with all that out of the way, let's get started. The easiest place to start is the beginning, so let's start with the 1991 game, Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, there are some events from other games that take place before Sonic 1, but they're mainly just backstory and lore. Sonic 1 came out on the Sega Genesis, but thankfully it's available as a part of the Sonic Origins collection, which is $29.99 on Steam. Also, to make things easier, I'm just gonna round up the numbers for the prices. So in this case, $29.99 is just $30. Thankfully, the next 3 Sonic games, Sonic CD, Sonic 2, and Sonic 3 and Knuckles are also in Sonic Origins. However, we have a problem. That problem is that technically, on the Sonic Channel timeline, it has Sonic and Knuckles, not Sonic 3 and Knuckles. To very briefly go over the backstory, Sonic 3 was originally planned to be one huge game, but due to how big the game had become, it was split into 2 parts. The first part being called Sonic the Hedgehog 3, released in February 1994, and the second part being called Sonic & Knuckles, released about 8 months later in October 1994. Both games were released for the Sega Genesis. However, Sonic & Knuckles was released on a special Genesis cartridge that could physically connect to other game cartridges, and by combining with Sonic 3, you got the full experience of the 2 games together called Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which is widely considered to be the definitive version of the game. But strangely, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is not the version of the game included on the timeline. It's just the second half, Sonic and Knuckles. So, because we have to play Sonic and Knuckles and not Sonic 3 and Knuckles, things get a little more complicated because Sonic and Knuckles standalone is not easy to come by these days. The game was on Steam, but has since been delisted. So, to solve this problem, what we're gonna do is buy an Xbox 360 Slim and a Kinect, along with a copy of Sonic Mega Collection Plus for the original Xbox. This game was essentially Sonic Origins before Sonic Origins, having a ton of the classic Sonic games, but Mega Collection has the benefit of having Sonic and Knuckles as a separate game from Sonic 3. The Xbox 360 is backwards compatible with many original Xbox games, including Mega Collection Plus, so we should be able to play it no problem. You might be scratching your head a bit as to why we're buying a Kinect, but it'll make sense later. The Xbox 360, along with all the cables, a controller, and a Kinect, will come to around $100, and Mega Collection Plus will be about $8. To make things simple, for PC games, I'll be using Steam prices, and for secondhand games, consoles, and peripherals, I'll just be using the prices I see online from third-party resellers as a reference. But with all of that out of the way, we have the first 4 games accounted for. Next, we move on to Sonic Mania, which is $20 on Steam. Easy enough, right? Well, technically, the Sonic Channel website specifically lists Sonic Mania Plus on the timeline, which is the expanded version of the game that includes the Encore DLC that added Ray the Flying Squirrel and Mighty the Armadillo. So we'll have to spend an extra $5 to get the Encore DLC for a total cost of $25. Our next game is Sonic Superstars, which is available on Steam for $60, which is the most expensive game so far. Superstars is also the last game in the classic era of Sonic on the timeline. Moving on to our first games in the modern era, we have Sonic 4 Episode 1 and Episode 2, which is kind of weird since these games are heavily inspired by the Genesis games. In any case, both games are available on Steam for $10 each, meaning we gotta pay $20 to get both of them. Next is Sonic Adventure, which was originally released on the Dreamcast in 1998. Luckily, we won't need to buy a Dreamcast because the timeline specifically lists Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut, which is the GameCube port of the game that boosted the frame rate to 60 frames per second, used new 3D models, and made a bunch of other noticeable graphical changes. This GameCube port then got ported to a couple of other platforms like Steam in 2010. On Steam, the game is $8. Remember when I said we won't need to buy a Dreamcast? Well, I lied. Because we'll need one for our next game, Sonic Shuffle, a party game that never got any sort of re-release on any other console. So we're going to have to scrape together $30 to buy the game and another $130 for a Dreamcast. For future reference, I'm going to include the cost of all of the cables, the controller, and other needed stuff into the total cost of the console. Moving right along, next up is Sonic Adventure 2, which was originally released on the Dreamcast back in 2001. Luckily, there's an HD version of the game on Steam, which is available for $10. However, the technically timeline strikes again because technically the game listed on the timeline is Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, the updated GameCube port of the game that added a bunch of new multiplayer options. This version is also on Steam, but upgrading from Sonic Adventure 2 to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle will cost you an extra $3 for a total of $13. Next, we move on to our first handheld game, Sonic Advance 2 for the Game Boy Advance. For whatever reason, the timeline decided to skip Sonic Advance 1, probably because Advance 1 doesn't really have much story, but in any case, yeah, we're starting with Sonic Advance 2. We will have to buy a console to play the game, and in this case, we're gonna go with a Nintendo DS Lite, which is backwards compatible with most GBA games, including this one. The DS Lite will also come in handy for a few later games. Unfortunately, the advanced games aren't available on any modern platforms, so we'll have to turn to the secondhand market for both the DS and the game. Sonic Advance 2 is about $20, and a Nintendo DS Lite will run us about $60. Our next game is Sonic Heroes, which is a multi-platform game released on the PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC. This game has no releases on modern platforms. Since we already have an Xbox 360, we'll just get the Xbox version, which is about $15. We have another multi-platform game, which is Shadow 05. Like Heroes, this game got a PS2, Xbox, and GameCube release, but it wasn't on PC. So, like with Heroes, we'll be getting the Xbox disc, which is actually fairly expensive at about $40. Next up is Sonic Battle, a fighting game for the Game Boy Advance, which costs about $35 secondhand. For our last GBA game, we have Sonic Advance 3, which, like Advance 2, is also about $20. Next up, we have our first DS game, Sonic Rush. The DS is great because we get access to GBA and DS games. A Sonic Rush cartridge costs about $15 used. After that, we have Sonic 06, which is our first Xbox 360 game. Luckily, we already have an Xbox 360. This game is about $20 on the secondhand market. We're gonna go back to the OG Xbox with the Xbox version of Sonic Riders. Yeah, apparently the Sonic Riders racing games are a crucial part of the Sonic story to the point where they're included on the Sonic timeline. Sonic Riders on Xbox goes for about $30. Next up, we have the sequel to Sonic Rush, Sonic Rush Adventure, which is also on the DS, but it's a bit more expensive than its predecessor on the used market, costing about $25. Up next is the sequel to Sonic Riders, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, which strangely only got a release on the PlayStation 2 and the Wii. I'm guessing it's because the PS2 and Wii were incredibly popular budget consoles, and they didn't care to waste time making HD versions for PS3 and 360. In any case, we don't have a way of playing PS2 or Wii games, so we're gonna have to buy another console. PS2s are actually fairly expensive on the secondhand market now at about $90. So we're gonna go ahead and get a Wii for $60 and a copy of the Wii version of Sonic Riders Zero Gravity for $15. Our next game is Sonic Unleashed, which got released on a number of different platforms. It was released on PS3, 360, Wii, and PS2. We don't have any Sony consoles, so the PS2 and PS3 versions are out. However, we do have both a 360 and a Wii, so we have options. Most Sonic fans would probably consider the 360 version to be the best version of the game, so we'll just go with that, which is about $12. Next up is Sonic Colors for the Wii, is what I would say if the timeline didn't specifically list the remaster of the game, Sonic Colors Ultimate, which is on Steam for $40. Next, we have Sonic Generations, except not really because it's Sonic X Shadow Generations, the remaster of the game, which is $50 on Steam. After that is Sonic Free Riders on the Xbox 360. Remember how we got that Kinect for the 360 earlier? Well, that was for this game, which requires the Kinect for its motion controls. Luckily, the game is really cheap, only about $8. This is also the last game that we'll need to buy from some random weirdo online. Everything else from this point onward is currently available digitally on Steam. Next is Sonic Lost World, which was a Wii U and Nintendo 3DS exclusive for a few years, which would have made this list a lot more expensive. Thankfully, the game got a Steam release and it's $30 on there. After that is another racing game, Team Sonic Racing, which is the first game from the Sonic Racing series of kart racers to be on this list. I'm wondering if they'll add Cross Worlds to the timeline. Who knows, maybe SpongeBob, Joker, and Hatsune Miku all have a place in the Sonic canon. Anyways, TSR is on Steam for $40. Our penultimate game is Sonic Forces, which is available on Steam for $40. Finally, we have Sonic Frontiers, which is on Steam for $60. But that's it, folks. That's every game on the timeline accounted for. So it's time for the grand finale. The total cost to play all of the Sonic games on the official timeline is $1,059, which is a lot of money, if you couldn't tell. By far, the biggest money pits on this list are the legacy consoles that you need to play the out-of-print games. The 360 Slim plus Kinect, Dreamcast, DS, and Wii consoles altogether cost $350, which is nearly a third of the total cost. That means the total cost for only the games is $709. Now, to be fair, Sonic games do go on sale quite often. In fact, nearly all of the Sonic games on Steam are on sale right now as I'm writing this script. If my count is correct, every single Sonic game on the timeline that is currently available on Steam is on sale. Except Team Sonic Racing, for some reason. Most of the time though, TSR will go on sale when the other Sonic games go on sale. So if you factor in all of the games on the timeline on Steam being on sale, then the total cost of just the 29 games would be around $440, which is on average about $15 per game. Of course, it's gonna be up to you whether or not you think that price is worth it or not. But yeah, I think that's about it for this video. If you're interested in watching more videos where I talk about stuff, here's a video you might enjoy, and here's a whole playlist of Sonic videos for you to check out if you're looking for something to marathon or to just have something to listen to as background noise. That's all I've got to talk about for today though, so thanks for watching y'all and have a great rest of your day.